Tonight, we escape into the shadows for another edition of Steamy Stories After Dark, marked by midnight. If you find yourself captivated by my stories, share the secret with a friend. Please subscribe and click the bell to join our community. And if you'd like, leave a comment to share what time it is and what part of the world you're in as you listen. It is nice to see the reach this series is getting. And if you have ideas for future stories, please comment. Now it is time to settle in. The journey starts now. The dawn over Arkenfall Academy didn't bring light. It brought a bruised violet haze that clung to the jagged stone spires like a shroud. I stood on the edge of the blackwood balcony, the stone biting into my palms, watching the mist roll over the training grounds. My skin felt too tight. Every breath I took tasted of copper and ozone, the lingering ghost of the blood oath we had sworn in the dark. Beneath the silk of my sleeve, the mark didn't just pulse anymore. It breathed. It had a rhythm, a heavy thrumming heat that synced perfectly with the man standing 3 paces behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know Kade was watching me. I could feel the weight of his gaze like a physical touch against the nape of my neck. "It's different now, isn't it?" His voice drifted through the cold air, low and rough, like gravel over velvet. I finally turned. Kade Valen looked like a shadow given human form. His dark hair was windswept, his jaw tight with a tension that never seemed to leave him. But it was his eyes, those piercing, mercury silver eyes that held me pinned. They weren't just looking at me. They were reading the very frequency of my soul. "I feel loud," I whispered, hugging my arms across my chest, like I'm a bell that's been struck and won't stop ringing. "I can feel the academy, Kade. I can feel the wards in the walls. I can feel the fear in the dormitories." Kade stepped closer, closing the distance until the heat radiating from his body pushed back the morning chill. He didn't touch me, not yet, but the air between us crackled. "That's the oath," he murmured, leaning down so his lips were inches from my ear. "You aren't just a scholarship student playing at magic anymore, Elara. You've tapped into the Volan well. My blood is moving through your heart. My power is your power." He reached out, his long fingers ghosting over the fabric covering my wrist. Even through the cloth, the contact sent a jolt of silver fire straight to my core. "The council thinks they still own the leash," he said, his voice dropping to a predatory growl. "They're waiting for us in the Great Hall. They think they can pull the tether and watch you crawl. They have no idea that the leash has turned into a blade." We walked through the corridors of Arkenfall not as predator and prey, but as a unified storm. The architecture of the school felt oppressive today. The gargoyles seemed to leer. The portraits of past high counselors followed us with judgmental, painted eyes. Usually, I walked these halls with my head down, trying to blend into the shadows, trying to be the invisible girl who earned her way here with books and silence. Not today. Kade walked with a lethal, effortless grace, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. Every student we passed froze. The whispers followed us like a wake behind a ship. "Is that her? Look at her eyes. They're changing. Valen has finally broken her." They didn't understand. He hadn't broken me. He had unmade the version of me that was a victim. We reached the heavy iron-bound doors of the great hall. 2 enforcers stood guard, their armor etched with the council sigil. They stepped forward to block our path, their spears crossing with a metallic clack. "The girl enters alone," the taller one said, his voice muffled by his helm. Orders of Dean Thorne. Kade didn't slow down. He didn't even look at them. Move, Kade said. It wasn't a request. It was a command that vibrated in the very floorboards. The enforcer leveled his spear at Kade's chest. Valen, don't make this... Kade's hand moved faster than I could follow. He didn't strike the man. He simply caught the shaft of the spear. A pulse of silver light erupted from his palm, traveling down the wood like liquid lightning. The spear shattered into 1,000 splinters, and the enforcer was thrown back against the stone wall as if hit by a physical shock wave. The other guard hesitated, his hand shaking. Kade looked at him, his silver eyes glowing with an ancient, terrifying light. I said, "Move." The guard stepped aside, his head bowed in primal terror. Kade pushed the doors open. The sound echoed through the cavernous hall like a thunderclap. Dean Thorne sat at the high table, flanked by 3 members of the Academy Council. They looked like vultures in their heavy crimson robes. Thorne held a small obsidian focus in his hand, the master key to the marks they placed on scholarship students. "Elara Hale," Thorne said, his voice echoing. "You have violated a dozen Academy edicts in the last 48 hours. You have consorted with a high heir outside of sanctioned hours. You have accessed forbidden sectors of the library." He stood up, his eyes narrowing. "And you have allowed your mark to become unstable. We are going to recalibrate it. Now." He raised the obsidian focus. It began to glow with a sickly, oily violet light. Usually when that focus was activated, I would fall to my knees. The mark would burn like acid, dragging my will down into a dark pit of obedience. I braced myself, my heart hammering against my ribs. Thorne twisted the focus. "Kneel, girl." The focus flared. I felt a tug, a sharp, cold pull at my wrist. But then I felt Kade's hand tighten on my waist. "Give it to me," his voice echoed in my mind, a silent telepathic roar. "Channel the pull to me." I didn't kneel. I stood taller. I felt the council's magic hit the mark, but instead of burning me, it felt like a splash of lukewarm water. I reached into the blood oath, grabbing hold of that silver thread Kade had planted in my soul, and I pulled. The silver magic surged forward, meeting the council's violet light and swallowing it whole. The obsidian focus in Thorne's hand began to vibrate. Then it began to smoke. What is this?" Thorne stammered, his face turning a ghostly shade of white. "What are you doing?" "You thought she was a tether?" Kade's voice rang out, cold and mocking. "You thought you could use her to hold me back, to keep the Valen line in check." Kade stepped forward, pulling me with him. "You made a mistake, Thorne. You gave me a partner. You gave me a reason to stop playing your games." The obsidian focus shattered in Thorne's hand, the shards drawing blood from his palm. He screamed, stumbling back. The silence that followed was deafening. Kade leaned over the table, his shadow stretching long and dark over the council members. "The mark is ours now," Kade whispered. "And so is this school. This is the only warning you get. Stay out of our way, or I will burn Arkenfall to the ground just to hear you scream in the embers." We retreated to Kade's private quarters, a sanctuary of dark stone, heavy velvet, and the scent of sandalwood and rain. The adrenaline was still singing in my veins, making my fingers tremble. Kade shut the door and leaned his back against it, watching me. The mask of the dark air had slipped, replaced by something hungrier, something more vulnerable. "You did it," he breathed. "You redirected their magic." "I didn't do it," I said, walking toward him. "We did it." I stopped inches from him. The air was thick, charged with the aftermath of the confrontation. "Show me," I whispered. "Show me how to control it. I don't want to just survive the next time they attack. I want to be ready." Kade's eyes darkened. He reached out, his hands sliding up my arms to my shoulders, pulling me flush against him. My breath hitched. The physical connection was overwhelming, but the magical connection was even louder. "It's about the flow, Elara," he murmured, his voice vibrating against my forehead. "Magic isn't a weapon you swing. It's a tide you let in." He guided my hands to his chest, right over his heart. "Close your eyes. Feel the oath. Don't fight the silver. Invite it." I closed my eyes. At first, there was only the sound of his heart, steady, strong, fast. Then, the silver light began to bleed through. It felt like liquid starlight pouring into my palms. It was beautiful and terrifying. It made my skin tingle. It made my blood feel like it was boiling with pleasure. "Kade," I gasped, my head falling back. "I have you," he growled, his grip tightening on my waist. "Let it in, Elara. All of it." The power crested. It wasn't just magic anymore. It was us. I could feel his memories, the loneliness of the Valen Tower, the weight of his father's expectations, the moment he first saw me in the library and felt the world shift. And he could feel me. My fear, my growing desire, the way I wanted him to never let go. The magic flared, a blinding burst of violet and silver that lit up the room. The wards on the walls hummed in protest. The glass on the table shattered from the sheer pressure of the aura we were projecting. Kade groaned, his face baring in the crook of my neck. His breath was hot, ragged. "You're too strong," he whispered against my skin. "You're going to be the death of me, Elara Hale." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his thumb tracing my lower lip. But I think I'd welcome it. The rest of the day was a blur of shadows and secrets. We didn't stay in his room. We moved through the academy like ghosts. Kade showed me the hidden passages, the veins of Arkenfall that the council had forgotten. We met with the others, the scholarship students. They were hiding in the disused alchemy labs, their faces pale, their marks glowing with a dull, sickly light. They looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. "She broke the focus," one girl whispered. I felt it. The pain. It just stopped for a second. I looked at them, really looked at them. They were brilliant, talented, and they were being drained dry by a system that saw them as batteries. "It can stop forever," I told them, my voice steady. "But you have to choose. The council offers you safety in exchange for your soul. We offer you freedom, but freedom is dangerous." One by one they stood up. It wasn't a loud rebellion. There were no shouts, no clashing swords. It was a silent coup, a shifting of loyalties in the dark. By nightfall, the power structure of Arkenfall had tilted. The council still sat in their high chairs, but the foundation beneath them was rotting. The peace didn't last. We were walking back from the lower levels when the smell hit us. Iron, burnt ozone. Kade pushed me behind him. his hand erupting in silver flame. Stay back. We turned the corner into the north corridor. A body lay sprawled across the floor. It was Counselor Vane, the most vocal of Thorne's supporters. He wasn't bloody. He didn't look like he had fought, but his eyes were wide, turned to glass. And on his chest, burned through his expensive silk robes, was a perfect, glowing silver sigil. The Valen crest. I looked at Kade, my heart dropping into my stomach. Kade, did you? Kade stared at the body, his face a mask of pure shock. No, he whispered. I've been with you all day. He knelt by the body, his hand hovering over the glowing mark. This isn't my magic, he said, his voice trembling with a rare edge of fear. This is old. This is ancestral. The academy bells began to toll. Clang. 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 The sound of a lockdown. Someone is framing us, I whispered, looking at the shadows dancing on the walls. Or, Kade said, standing up and pulling me into the darkness of a nearby alcove as the sound of running boots approached. Someone is coming to claim what they think I've prepared for them. He looked at me, his silver eyes hard as diamonds. The war didn't just start, Elara. It just got a lot bigger than the council. The invitation didn't arrive on parchment. It arrived as a command burned into the air of our shared sanctuary, the Traitor's Gala. The council was clever. They knew that after the death of Counselor Vane, the academy was a powder keg. They knew the students were whispering about the silver sigil found on a dead man's chest. So, instead of a trial, they gave us a masquerade. They gave us silk to hide the bruises and wine to drown the fear. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in Kade's chambers, my breath hitching as I looked at the woman staring back. I didn't recognize her. The dress Kade had chosen for me was a masterpiece of obsidian silk that seemed to swallow the light. It clung to my curves like a second skin, the neckline plunging dangerously low, held together by delicate silver chains that mimicked the lines of the blood oath. But it was the mask that changed everything. It was crafted from dark filigree, shaped like the wings of a raven, casting jagged shadows across my cheekbones. My eyes, once a simple, scholarly brown, now held flecks of violet that pulsed whenever I thought of Kade. You look like a queen preparing for a slaughter. Kade's voice drifted from the shadows of the balcony. I turned. He was dressed in a high-collared military tunic of deep charcoal, his family crest pinned to his chest in cold, unyielding silver. He hadn't put his mask on yet. His face was a study in lethal beauty. Sharp angles, a mouth that knew only how to command or consume, and those silver eyes that seemed to see through the walls of the world. He walked toward me, his boots clicking rhythmically against the marble. He stopped so close I could smell the rain and sandalwood that always clung to him. "Are you afraid, Elara?" he murmured, his hand lifting to trace the edge of my mask. "I should be," I whispered, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "The Headmaster knows about the oath. The council wants us dead, and we're walking straight into their ballroom." Kade's thumb slid down to my chin, tilting my head back. "Let them watch. Let them wonder. Tonight, we aren't their subjects. We are the ghost in their machine." He leaned down, his lips brushing the sensitive skin just below my ear. A shiver raced down my spine, a mixture of terror and a hunger so sharp it hurt. "If anyone touches you," he growled, his voice vibrating against my skin, I will tear this academy down stone by stone until I find their heart. 2. The Descent into the Den. The great hall had been transformed. Thousands of enchanted candles floated near the vaulted ceiling, dripping wax that vanished before it hit the floor. The air was thick with the scent of lilies, the flower of the dead, and the cloying sweetness of expensive champagne. A string quartet played a haunting, minor key waltz that felt more like a funeral march than a celebration. As we descended the grand staircase, the room went silent. It wasn't the respectful silence of the elite. It was the silence of a forest when a wolf enters the clearing. Kade didn't lead me. We walked side by side, our shoulders brushing, a unified front of dark silk and silver magic. I could feel the mark on my wrist heating up, reacting to the hundreds of other marks in the room. The scholarship students were there, huddled near the edges of the ballroom. They wore masks of cheap lace and porcelain, their eyes wide and haunted. They looked at me, the girl who had broken the dean's focus, and I felt a surge of responsibility that nearly brought me to my knees. "Don't look away," Kade whispered, his hand finding the small of my back. "Look at them. Let them see that you aren't afraid of the gold on the walls." We reached the floor, and the crowd parted like a wound. Dean Thorne was there, his hand still bandaged from where the obsidian focus had shattered. He wore a mask of solid gold, shaped like a lion, but it couldn't hide the sneer on his lips. "Valen," Thorne said, his voice tight, "I'm surprised you showed your face after the unfortunate passing of Counselor Vane." Cade's grip on my waist tightened. "I wouldn't miss a gala thrown in honor of a man I didn't kill, Thorne. It seems a waste of good wine." The tension was a physical weight. I could see the council's enforcers stationed at every exit, their hands resting on the hilts of their blades. This wasn't a party. It was an execution waiting for a signal. 3. The Secret Rebellion. "Dance with me," Kade commanded. He led me to the center of the floor. The music shifted, becoming faster, more aggressive. As we spun, the world became a blur of gold and black. Kade moved with a terrifying precision, his body a pillar of strength that I leaned into, letting him guide me through the sea of enemies. "Listen to me," he murmured as he dipped me low, his face inches from mine. The scholarship students, they're waiting for a sign. In the third movement of the waltz, the lights will flicker. That is when you move. "Move where?" I breathed, my head spinning. "To the shadows. Talk to the ones marked with the violet ribbon. Tell them the armory is unguarded. Tell them that when the bells strike midnight, the wards on the north gate will drop." My heart nearly stopped. "Kade, that's treason." "No," he growled, pulling me back up and spinning me into the arms of a passing elite heir, a distraction, before reclaiming me a second later. "It's a coup, and you are the one they will follow." The music reached a crescendo. The enchanted candles sputtered, the light dimming to a deep bloody crimson for 3 heartbeats. I slipped away. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, my obsidian dress blending into the shadows. I found the first student, a boy named Elias, whose mark was so inflamed it looked like a burn. "The north gate," I whispered as I passed him, pretending to reach for a glass of wine. "Midnight, the tether is broken." I saw his eyes widen behind his mask. He nodded, a sharp, jerky motion. I moved to the next, and the next. I was planting seeds of fire in a room made of dry wood. I could feel the shift in the air, the way the scholarship students began to stand a little straighter, the way their fear was curdling into a cold, hard resolve. 4. The balcony confrontation. I needed air. The heat of the room, the smell of the lilies, and the weight of the secrets were suffocating me. I slipped through the heavy velvet curtains onto the west balcony. The night air was freezing, biting at my exposed skin, but I welcomed it. I leaned against the stone railing, looking out over the dark spires of Arkenfall. It's a long way down, Elara. I spun around. Kade was standing in the doorway, his mask gone, his silver eyes glowing with a fierce, unholy light. He looked haunted. He looked like a man who had seen the end of the world and was decided on how to burn it. He walked toward me, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't stop until I was backed against the stone, the cold railing pressing into my spine. "You did well," he whispered, his hands coming up to rest on either side of my head, pinning me. "They're ready. The fire is lit." "Kade," I said, my voice trembling. "What happens if we fail? What happens if the Headmaster catches us before midnight?" Kade leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. I could feel the raw power of the blood oath humming between us, a physical vibration that made my teeth ache. "Then we die," he said simply. "But we die together, and we die free." His hand moved to my neck, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. His touch was electric, a searing heat that made me forget the cold, forget the council, forget everything except the man in front of me. "I've spent my whole life being a weapon for a family I hated," he growled, his voice dropping to a raw, intimate register. "I've spent every night in this academy waiting for something that felt real, and then I found you." He leaned down, his mouth hovering just a hair's breadth from mine. "You aren't just my weapon, Elara. You're my soul, and I will burn every soul in that ballroom before I let them take a single breath from you." He kissed me then, not the desperate, frantic kiss of the garden, but something deeper, something possessive. It tasted of wine and dark promises. It was the kiss of a king claiming his queen before a battle. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with a hunger that terrified me. He reached for my wrist, the one with the mark. "They gave you this mark to control you," he whispered. He bit his own thumb, a drop of silver-red blood welling up. He pressed it against the violet mark on my skin. "I'm giving you this one to remind you who you belong to." He pressed his lips to the mark, his teeth grazing the skin. A jolt of pure, unadulterated power shot through me, turning my vision white. The mark flared, the violet turning into a brilliant, blinding silver. It didn't hurt. It felt like coming home. 5. The reveal. A touching scene. The voice was like ice water poured over a fire. We spun around. The Headmaster stood in the doorway, his face a mask of cold, clinical detachment. He wasn't alone. 6 enforcers stood behind him, their spears leveled at our chests. "I had hoped," the Headmaster said, walking onto the balcony, "that you would be smarter than this, Valen. To perform a blood oath in the middle of a lockdown, it's sloppy." Kade stepped in front of me, his hand erupting in silver flame. "Get back, Thorne." "Oh, I don't think so," the Headmaster said, a cruel smile touching his lips. "You see, the Council didn't just give Elara a mark to control her, they gave her a mark to monitor her." He held up a small silver compass. The needle was pointing directly at my heart. Every word you've whispered tonight, every student you've spoken to, we've heard it all. My blood turned to ice. The rebellion, Elias, the North Gate. The scholarship students are being rounded up as we speak, the headmaster continued, his voice devoid of emotion. And as for you, Elara, the blood oath is a fascinating piece of magic, but it has one fatal flaw. He stepped closer, his eyes locking onto mine. It requires both hearts to be beating. He raised his hand, and the enforcers moved forward. Kill the girl, the headmaster commanded, and bring the violent heir to the sanctum. It's time we reminded him what happens to traitors. 6. The Cliffhanger. The world exploded into chaos. Kade roared, a sound of pure animalistic fury, and a wave of silver magic blasted outward, throwing the first 2 enforcers over the balcony railing. Run! Kade screamed at me, his hands glowing like twin suns. Elara, run to the library, the hidden passage behind the Valen crest. Go! I'm not leaving you, I cried, dodging a spear thrust. Go! He roared, his eyes turning entirely silver. I'll find you. I promise. I turned and ran. I ran through the velvet curtains, back into the ballroom. But the gala was gone. The music had stopped. The elite heirs were gone, replaced by a sea of armored enforcers. I saw Elias being dragged away, his face bloody. I saw the other students being shackled in anti-magic iron. I reached the grand staircase, my lungs burning, my heart hammering against my ribs. But as I reached the top, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It wasn't an enforcer. It was a woman. She wore a gown of white silk, her hair a crown of silver. She looked exactly like Kade. You must be Elara, she said, her voice like a chime in the dark. She held out a hand. My son is a fool to think he can save you, but I have a different use for a girl with a mark like yours. Behind her, the doors to the great hall slammed shut, and the screaming began.